welcome again, and thank you so much for being with us today. My name is Jessie Destin. I'm an energy efficiency consultant with Eversource. I work with municipalities and small businesses in New Hampshire. And I am going to be talking about the commercial program today, including mostly small businesses and municipal customers, and also some financing options, in addition to the incentives that are available as well. Great. So just a reminder that any questions should go in the Q&A box, and we'll be happy to answer them at the end of the session. Great. Okay. So the agenda is pretty straightforward. I'm just going to talk about NHSaves itself, in case anyone is unfamiliar, and then get into the commercial programs and the incentives available, as well as the on-bill financing options, and then we'll have time for questions. But anyway, hopefully this will give you a sense of how we can help customers save on their energy bills, and also encourage customers to implement energy efficiency projects. So great. So I assume many of you are familiar with NHSaves. Just in case, this is a collaboration of the New Hampshire utilities. They're listed at the bottom here: Eversource, Liberty, Unitil, and the Electric Co-op. The collaboration streamlines and strengthens our ability to provide customers with information on saving energy and reducing costs. There are programs for every customer type. So you'll hear about a lot of them today. Like I said, I'm going to be talking mostly about small commercial and municipal. But like I said, we have programs for residential customers as well. Every customer type has access to the programs that we're going to be talking about here today. And I also just wanted to point out that there's a lot of information on the NHSaves website, which is nhsaves.com. So this will be a really helpful resource to both you and the customers that you're working with. And so there's going to be information about all of the different program types. There's applications on the website, and there's information about all the different programs. There are case studies that can be really helpful to try to better understand the program. So definitely recommend checking out nhsaves.com for lots of information there. So again, you may be familiar with this, but just wanted to say the funding sources for these programs, the main one is the systems benefit charge. Residential customers, businesses, everybody pays into this fund, and that allows us to implement these programs. So it's, I like to tell customers, like, you're paying into this, everyone's paying into this. So it's definitely something that, we should take advantage of. And so this goes into a fund that then allows the utility providers to, take that money and look at cost-effective ways to implement energy efficiency projects. And so that goes into the incentives and the financing that we have available. Another funding source is called the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. And that allows us to look at projects with delivered fuel, even, for example, as Eversource is the electric utility, but it allows us to look at buildings that have delivered fuel, oil and propane. It's just in the municipal program, but that does give us a little bit more flexibility in terms of the non-electric projects that we can look at. So I would always recommend checking in with your utility specific to the project that you're working on. But like I said, for many areas, it means we can incentivize something like weatherization for a municipality if they have delivered fuel or replacing boilers, and whatnot. So these are the two main funding sources here. Just a little overview here of the commercial program. So anything that can cost effectively save energy, we can consider for funding, for incentives. So some examples of that are listed here: lighting, motors, VFDs, HVAC systems and controls, refrigeration controls, kitchen equipment, And then there are custom measures. And so let me just back it up a little bit, that kind of the two main types of incentives being prescriptive and custom. So prescriptive means that um, there's a certain dollar amount attached to a certain piece of equipment for lighting or for heat pumps. And a lot of those applications that have the prescriptive amounts are on nhsaves.com, as I said. So that is going to be always a certain dollar amount for that equipment. And then custom projects are, we'll look at other types of projects that can be shown to save energy, but we basically need to look at the energy calculations, go through a review process with our engineers, and then we would come up with a custom amount to be put towards the project that's typically based on the project cost. Um, so these programs are streamlined across the different utility providers so that this information is largely going to be relevant for all of them, although there could be minor differences. So it's always good practice to reach out directly to the utility for that area when you're working on a project. So for example, Eversource might be looking at electric only for commercial customers, whereas Liberty and Unitil would be looking at the gas savings. And then as I said, municipalities are eligible for HVAC upgrades and weatherization, even if they have delivered fuel. But like I said, this could be slightly different for the different providers. So definitely check in based on when you're working on a project. But obviously, if a customer has natural gas, then they're going to be eligible for those savings through the natural gas provider. So just make sure you're checking in on that. Make sure you're checking in on both electric and natural gas savings potential for projects if you're working with a customer that has both of those areas. So, but for commercial, we're typically going to be looking at electric and gas savings. So a deeper dive into the municipal program. We do, like I said, we do prescriptive projects as well as custom. So again, this is going to vary a little bit by utility, but we're kind of right around the range of 65 cents per kWh of savings, which is just kind of an example because it's not a great way to explain it to a customer, but kind of another way to explain it is to look at the prescriptive savings, as I said, I'm sorry, prescriptive incentives on the applications, but then also for custom projects, we're typically in the range of 35 to 50% coverage of the project cost. Again, always something you want to check in on as you're looking at a specific project, because it will depend on the energy savings and the cost and a couple of different factors when we look at those projects. So like I said, dependent on our cost benefit analysis and the savings through the engineering review. Like I said, oil and propane incentives are in some cases available. And then something that I will talk a little bit more about later, but that we always want to suggest an audit or an energy assessment or a scoping study. Those are kind of the different names for it. It's always going to be a good place to start. And we have no cost assessments available in one way or another to every customer type. They should always be able to access some information about their energy usage in the context of being able to introduce them to the concept of energy efficiency and projects that they can do in order to save energy. It looks a little bit different for each customer type. So it may be built into a turnkey program, such as with the small commercial program. Or in municipal, we can typically offer scoping studies where the customer will receive a report of their, a detailed report of their energy usage. And then we also have TA studies for looking more in depth. So definitely always a good thing to suggest. Great. So this is just a quick case study of a firehouse in Stoddard that was weatherized. And actually, they did have a scoping study here. So love it when that, can be converted into a project. So that can give them some really good information. But they did have insulation and air sealing, and we're provided with 50% of the project cost for this. And just wanted to point out that the reason I was given these photos to share is because the customer was really happy with the outcome of this, with the work that was done, and also the savings that they were seeing on their energy bill. So just wanted to share that. So a little bit more about the municipal program. I want to go into the workflow here. It's a little bit different, like I said, with different programs for different customer types. This is how it generally looks for the municipal program, and this also would be relevant for large commercial, and then small business is more of a turnkey program, which I'll get into a little bit more later. But so for the municipal program, the workflow looks like first defining the project scope. And so that could include a scoping study or an assessment. It could just include a customer working with a contractor to define what the project is. So first we want to figure out what they want to do, right? And then we need to review it. So that looks like documentation that is submitted to the utility for an engineering review. And so you'll want to make sure that you know who to reach out to on the team of the utility that covers the area that you're working with. But in any case, so there's an engineering review. It takes a couple of weeks to go over everything. So we'll typically need an application. And then depending on the type of project, generally spec sheets are needed, always a project quote so we know what the cost is. And then whichever application is relevant, we may need other energy calculations. But again, we would be working, on that with you. So engineering review, and then once that all goes through, the customer understands what the incentive is, they will get a letter of approval. Which is listed on here under project installation. So they do get the letter of approval first so that they know what the incentive amount is going to be. And then they will do the install. Once the installation is completed, we have closeout documents that we need where they would sign off that the installation is complete and they're happy with it. And then the payment is issued after the fact. So that is the workflow, like I said, that's specific to the municipal program. Moving on to the small business program runs slightly differently. And I believe most of the utilities have a turnkey program here. Like I said, it might not be exactly the same, but this is generally how we like to serve small businesses, because having a turnkey program just makes the process really easy for them. So we do have contracted vendors that can offer this, but any contractor can participate in this program as well. It just is slightly different how the workflow looks. But in any case, it involves a no-cost assessment. The vendor proposes a new system or an improvement to the existing system. Then the vendor, the customer signs off on it, and the quote includes the incentive. So it's basically like having a discount on the project. And then the vendor also handles the installation, permitting, and all of the paperwork. And like I said, the NHSaves utility partner pays a portion of the cost. And then the available measures kind of depend on the area that they're in, but generally lighting, refrigeration, HVAC controls, custom projects, it's generally going to be electric or gas measures that are going to be eligible for this. So like I said, we do currently have some vendors who are contracted to go in and do these, have certain territories assigned to them, but also anybody can participate. Please reach out if you have questions about how this can work for you with small business customers, because we try to have kind of this turnkey model so that it's just really easier for them to participate. Sometimes there are specific initiatives that may even enhance the incentives. We do Main Streets is an initiative that is in Massachusetts, is a great longstanding program, and we're starting to do more of these in New Hampshire, where we'll go to a certain city or town during a specific period of time, and the contractor will, sort of do some canvassing and be able to offer a slightly increased incentive for these programs. So we get lots of great feedback for this. And actually, if you go to the next slide, there's another case study. This is obviously a business in Manchester, and they through the as part of the Main Streets program, they added VFDs and upgraded their lighting and added controls. They had a pretty good energy savings there at 87,000 annual, and were provided with $64,000 for an incentive. And again, they were very happy with this project and were even willing to have as part of the walkthrough that we all did together. The mayor was there, and some of the team members there. So they were ended up being happy with how the project went and the savings that they saw. So wanted to share this with you. So okay. Just a little bit more about prescriptive incentives. Like I said, this is the specific amount that's attached to specific piece of equipment. Any customer can access these incentives. Any contractor can participate. The self-install is okay on these. So if they're not participating in the turnkey program, they responsible for compliance and quality issues. But in any case, this is an easy way to kind of have that streamlining across the different types of measures that we can implement. One other program I wanted to mention is called Midstream. And so this would be separate from the workflows that I have described so far. This is something that you would find on the NHSaves.com website. So basically, this is a point of purchase discount. So we have participating distributors on the website. You would navigate to a certain measure type, and there's going to be all of them listed on there. And then you would click through to like lighting, for example, and then get to a participating distributors link. And so basically you could just purchase that equipment at a discount in order to install it, and then forget about all that other paperwork that's involved in the other program. So for some certain types of smaller projects, this can be really helpful. Like I said, the incentives are applied directly to the price at the time of sale. Incentives and distributor list is at nhsaves.com. So definitely something to check out. That can be a really great resource. And so I mentioned this already, but we really want to make sure customers are taking advantage of the technical assistance of the no-cost energy assessments that we can do. So these can be scoping studies, for example, for municipalities that for if a town is interested in better understanding their energy usage at the town library, the town hall, or even the schools. This can be a really great offering for them to be able to get that information. We can do more focused TA studies if there is a certain area that needs to be looked at. These are generally, we want these to be no cost. If there is a deeper dive that needs to be done, there could be a customer copay. But like I said, generally we want all customers to be able to access a no cost assessment. So that's something that is always a great place to start. Okay, so let's talk about financing. Again, this information is going to be slightly different for the different utility partners of NHSaves. So for the most part, these are on-bill financing options with 0% interest, and they have varying maximum loan amounts depending on the utility and depending on the program. So the incentive would be calculated. We do the project review, calculate the incentive, and then the loan would cover the remainder of the project, and it would be paid by the customer as part of their bill. So it's a super easy way for them to access financing so that they don't have any out-of-pocket costs for these projects. And then the exact monthly terms would depend on a few different factors, as I've mentioned. But there is some flexibility, and they typically have a couple of different options in terms of the length of the payback time, and so which would correspond to the monthly amount that they're paying off. Um, and the idea, ideally, the energy savings that they're seeing on their bill, the amount that they're saving, would correspond with the amount that they're paying off, so that they wouldn't really see that much difference in their bill, and then they paid off, and then they're seeing the benefit there. So Smart Start is something that I think is specific to Eversource. It's available to municipalities, but it's a similar program. The approval process is slightly different. But like I said, check with the provider when you're working on a project. And then the on-bill financing, I think, is available mostly across the board to small commercial customers. Um, so it's a really easy way, especially as part of the small business turnkey program, adding in the financing there, it just the whole process can be really easy for them to do this, to implement these projects without any out-of-pocket costs. Also check with your NHSaves partner before offering that, only because the um, the financing amounts that are available can change from time to time. So I have contractors check in with, a certain person in our finance team, just to say, hey, we want to see if this customer is eligible at this time, and that there's funding available. But yeah, like I said, it can be a really great way to get these projects off the ground. And then there's a third party option, and that there could be other third party financing options available here. But NEIF is definitely one that our business customers use from time to time. So that is something that, if there's interest in that, we can also go over that with you. Um, and and then of course there are sort of like a rotating array of other financing options and grants available through, state and federal agencies. And if customers are asking about those as well, I don't have information specific to that on these slides, but we do work with organizations, of course, that can assist customers in accessing, those funding opportunities as well. Next slide. Great. Okay. So to kind of wrap it all up, um, the best way to get started is visiting nhsaves.com and contacting your utility representative, and which would be me for Eversource. But we're happy to help you make those connections. And then contacting the equipment distributor or installer if you're interested in the midstream program, and always make sure that you're asking about those municipal audits, and the home energy assessments are specific to residential, but another really great resource. Um, and I think that wraps it up for me. I think our next slide is moving over to questions. So I really appreciate your time. And yeah, gonna have Joe come on here and see if we have any questions for me.
You hear me?
Yeah.
All right, perfect. So one of the questions that we had that came in was regarding the financing. Is that only available to municipalities, or is it also available to commercial?
It is also available to commercial, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, yep, the small commercial program in my experience is where we utilize it the most, the on-bill financing.
And another question that came through was, does the financing need to be pre-approved?
Yes, it does. Yep, yep. As in, when you are working with a customer who may be interested in that financing, check in check in with your utility provider. Um, so because we need to double check, there is um, eligibility criteria for it. So definitely check in with us. Just let us know the amount, who the customer is, what the project is, the amount of financing that they're looking for. Yep, it definitely, you definitely want to check in with us before you would, sign off with them. There's going to be a specific process for setting up that financing through your utility representative. So definitely check in.
Another question that came through was, can any contractor work with small business customers, or is this program only for vendors under contract with the utility?
Yep, that's a great question. Any contractor can participate. So, like I said, we do have some contracted vendors that work with small businesses, but anyone can participate. Reach out to your utility representative. We have it, an easy pathway for you to get the incentives approved when you're working with a small business customer. And even if you're not a contracted vendor, we still have the the turnkey option available to them where once we do the processing on our end, the incentive is built into the quote there. So it's very easy for them to participate. So any contractor can be a part of this program to be able to offer incentives to customers to be able to move those projects along.
And I think you might have touched a little bit on this, but somebody was looking for some more details on the interest rates of the Smart Start and the on-bill financing.
Right. So as far as I know, those are at 0% interest. So there is for the Smart Start loan, although I believe we might be changing this, but that it historically reduces their incentive by 10%. But that's just specific to Smart Start. And then there could be on the small business on bill financing, there could be a service charge of 5% on for some of the utility partners. I'm not 100% sure, but I would expect that there could be a small service fee, but that there's a 0% interest rate on those loans.
So that would definitely be an area that you'd want to contact the individual utility for specific details on.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Thank you, Joe.
So another question was regarding the on-bill financing for Lighten. I'll expand that. Is there any projects that uh, are not applicable for the on-bill financing?
Any specific, well, I guess if so for the commercial on-bill financing, it would, I think, mostly be restricted to electric or gas measures, depending on who you're working with. And I believe even the Smart Start financing isn't available if it's a delivered fuel project, if it's not electric or gas. So I think that would be the main limitation was that it be an electric or natural gas project. Um, I don't believe there are limitations on other types of projects, but would be, specific to different customer groups, such as municipal versus the small commercial. So again, make sure you're checking in, with your rep.
What are the dollar amount and term limits for customer financing?
Yeah, I would also double check with the utility that you're working with on the project because I believe it is slightly different. Um, so like for example, there's one, I don't think the Smart Start loan has any max limit, but I know of the small commercial program, and in one program it's 50,000, another program it's 20,000 for the maximum. I believe another one is 100, but it can vary. And then I also the term limits can also vary. It's typical for there to sort of be two different choices for the customer in terms of the payoff time and the monthly payments. But again, I would check in to make sure.
Uh, what defines a small business customer in New
Oh,
Hampshire?
that's a really good question. So we look at the average monthly demand. So 200 kilowatt demand and lower is defines a small business customer. And then higher than that would be large commercial, and you'd just be working with a specific team on that. But the less than 200 kW is how we define that threshold.
And kind of tying right into that, are what are some key measures for small business customers that you are seeing?
Yeah. So lighting is obviously a big one, but we also see a lot of VFDs being added into systems, and HVAC controls, transformers are, something that is a relatively new measure in New Hampshire that seems to be taking off because it can provide really great energy savings potential there. So rooftop units, ERVs, basically we can look at anything that's electric. We have historically seen a lot of lighting in the program, and would love to branch out a bit more into other areas that have slightly longer measure lives since the measure life of lighting has been going down. So at least from the electric utility perspective, branching out into some other measures that have those that have longer measure lives is something that we're definitely interested in.
And another question is, are there CDO options in New Hampshire? And CDO being the customer directed option.
Yep. Yes, there are. Yep. So I didn't get into that specifically, but if you are a contractor who is not one of our contracted vendors for the small business program, then CDO, the customer directed option, is how you would process those projects. And again, I have said this a bunch of times, but reach out to your specific representative. I don't want to, give give out so many details that like it's hard to keep track of everything. But customer directed option is basically that you would be working with our third party contracted partner to submit documentation for the project, but then from the customer's perspective, it still feels like a turnkey program where they can have the incentive built into the quote. So yes, customer directed option is the way that we process small business projects for those contractors that are not under contract with the utility.
Next question would be, what types of customers can access incentives for weatherization in New Hampshire?
Right. So I would say it depends again on the utility. So if for example, if it's an Eversource electric customer, then they would we're generally not able to weatherize in the small business program unless they have all electric heating and cooling. So it's really just municipalities that have access to that through the RGGI funds that we can weatherize. We can weatherize municipal buildings if they have delivered fuel. But if they're a natural gas customer with Liberty or Unitil, then we can absolutely weatherize those commercial buildings. So it's gonna to some extent depend on their fuel source. But I would say electric and gas customers of most types can do weatherizing. But again, yeah, check in, make sure the lines of communication are open with us. And everybody that works on the utility teams are really great to work with. And that's kind of the goal of the NHSaves collaboration, is to make sure that it's easy for you to understand the programs that offer these incentives. So, I would say make sure you know who your rep is, and they can help you with this information that's specific to each project.
And are there any special incentives available for nonprofits or low-income communities?
So in the on the commercial side, unfortunately, we do not have specific carve outs. And I I don't I am trying to speak for all of the utilities, but I don't believe so, except for on the residential side. Residential does have low income programs, which I don't know if I don't think we're speaking to any of those today, but those do exist in the residential program. But New Hampshire is a little bit different from Massachusetts. Does have the programs there do have carve outs for nonprofits. So we don't have those currently in New Hampshire. The nonprofits are considered small businesses. So we try to make the small business program as robust and as as easy to access as possible. But they would be considered small businesses, and it's somewhat because since we're state regulated, we're going along with the state policies, in the different areas that we're working in, and it's just something that is viewed differently in Massachusetts versus in New Hampshire.
And how about buildings that have both residential units and commercial units in it?
That's a really good question. Yep. So mixed use buildings, it sort of depends, but you would just be working probably with a combination of the residential and commercial teams, and it can kind of be on a case by case basis. But for example, if there is a commercial account within that building that is like a communal area that's run by the let's say like a condo association or something like that, and they want to upgrade the lighting. If there's a commercial account there, you could look at it through the small business program. But then the residential units would be looked at through the residential program. And there, certain mixed use buildings, there should be a point person who kind of has the best information about that. They can, in some cases, kind of be looked at together, but in general, we would kind of try to separate out, to look at if there's like a commercial storefront that's in the building and there's also residential units in the building. We would likely be looking at those separately to make sure that they are, able to access the incentives that are the most relevant for the customer type, based on the, based on their account type.
And who should somebody contact in regards to a small B CDO offering? So it sounds like this might be a contractor who wants to participate or a business that wants to participate in the customer directed option.
Yeah, that's a great question. So it depends in what town they're in and who their electric or gas provider is. So I'm certain that we will have some kind of information as part of this on the different contacts to reach out to. And then again, NHSaves.com has information, but I would be the point of contact for Eversource customers for small business. And you can always reach out to me if you're not sure who to contact, and I can, point you in the right direction. But yeah, that's why, I would say, if you're interested in participating, your first step likely is always going to be, who's the provider for this customer, and making sure that, you know who the representative is that you can reach out to, for the different utilities. But if it's Eversource territory, you can reach out to me.
Right. So a follow-up to something you covered, I think a little bit earlier was, does Eversource offer free energy assessments for commercial and municipal customers to help identify opportunities?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. So like I said, there should be no cost assessments available to every customer type. How we do them differs a little bit between commercial and municipal. Commercial being primarily through the turnkey program, where the assessment is basically identifying opportunities for energy efficiency projects that would then be, um, you know, suggested to the customer, and the incentive built into the quote for those projects. And then municipal is slightly different in that generally we can provide a specific amount of funding towards scoping studies, who would be that, and that would generally be done by a vendor who is not also doing the installation, and they provide them with a detailed report of their energy usage. So, like I said, it varies somewhat, um, but yes, there should be assessments available to all of
Right.
those customers.
We have another question. Can we get demand management program and hardware installation?
Great question. So I would probably follow up offline with the demand response team, because I am honestly not 100% sure there, but um, we do have folks who work in demand response, and there's a robust program over there. So I would love to just have a follow up with the person interested in demand response, because I could definitely connect them with the team there.
So that is, oh, that's all we have questions. If there's anybody else that has, or the questions that came in through the chat. So if anybody has any other questions, now would be the time. And we don't have any other questions, so looks like you did a
Great.
great job.
Great. Okay. Thanks so much for the help, Joe. And yeah, thanks so much everybody for tuning in. It's been great to be with you today. And please feel free to reach out. Thanks so much.